The unexpected encounter. Captain Ethan Rivers strode purposefully down the sleek corridors of the Celestial Nexus, a state-of-the-art space station hosting an intergalactic summit between several species. As head of security for the human delegation, it was his responsibility to ensure that everything went smoothly during this historic event. Clad in a fitted black uniform that emphasized his athletic build, Ethan's sharp green eyes scanned his surroundings for any signs of trouble. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and tension as representatives from various planets mingled in the grand hallways adorned with holographic displays showcasing their cultures. However, as he turned a corner, an unexpected blaring alarm echoed through the corridor, causing Ethan to tense up instinctively. His hand hovered near his sidearm as he searched for the source of the disturbance. Suddenly, a soothing voice cut through the chaos. "Attention guests. Please disregard the previous alert, our systems experienced a minor glitch. We apologize for any inconvenience." Ethan relaxed slightly but remained vigilant. Glitches had been occurring more frequently since their arrival. He quickly consulted his wrist-mounted holomap and pinpointed the location of the alarm, a room just ahead that was supposed to be unoccupied. As he approached, he noticed that the door was slightly ajar, a soft light spilling into the hallway. Curiosity piqued, he pushed the door open cautiously, ready for anything that might await him inside. What he found took his breath away. Standing in the center of the room was an alien woman unlike anyone he had ever seen before. Her skin shimmered in shades of lavender under the soft lighting, and her long hair flowed like liquid silver down her back. She wore a form-fitting outfit that accentuated her curves but left much to the imagination. Yet what truly left him speechless was her anatomy. She possessed 3 perfectly formed breasts instead of 2. It was a sight that defied all logic and understanding he had ever learned about biology. The woman turned abruptly at his entrance, surprise flashing across her striking violet eyes before narrowing into a glare. "Excuse me," she exclaimed, her voice melodic yet laced with irritation. "Does no one knock in your culture? Or is barging into ladies' rooms customary?" Ethan's cheeks flushed as he quickly averted his gaze, trying to regain his composure amidst this unexpected encounter. "I apologize," he stammered. "I thought I heard an alarm. I didn't mean to intrude." Her expression softened slightly as she crossed her arms over her chest defensively but then broke into a playful smile that lit up her face. "You thought I was in distress because of my unique anatomy?" She gestured playfully at her tri-breasted form. Ethan felt heat rise to his face again but managed to chuckle nervously. "It's certainly not something you see every day." She stepped closer, her confidence evident in every movement as she extended a slender hand toward him. "I'm Lyra Voss," she introduced herself with a hint of mischief in her voice. "Ethan Rivers," he replied as he took her hand gently, marveling at its coolness against his warm skin. "You're not like most humans," she remarked with intrigue dancing in her eyes. "They usually react with shock or disdain upon seeing me." "I assure you," Ethan replied earnestly, "your beauty is quite captivating." Lyra raised an eyebrow playfully as if challenging him to elaborate further. "A charmer too? I didn't expect that from your kind." Ethan felt an undeniable connection forming between them, a pull he couldn't quite explain but found exhilarating nonetheless. However, duty called, he reminded himself that he needed to remain focused on his responsibilities as head of security. "I shouldn't take up more of your time," he said reluctantly as he turned toward the door. "Wait," she called out just before he stepped out into the hallway again. He paused and looked back at her curiously. "Since you're here," she continued with an inviting smile, "perhaps you could help me with something. I seem to be having trouble with my room's temperature controls." Ethan hesitated for a moment. This was not how he envisioned first contact with an alien species during such an important mission. Yet there was something about Lyra, the way she carried herself and how she looked at him, that drew him in like a moth to flame. "I'd be happy to take a look," he found himself saying before stepping back into her room. As soon as he entered again, the door slid shut behind him with a soft whoosh, sealing them off from prying eyes and ears outside. The air crackled with tension as they stood close together, her presence intoxicatingly alluring yet daunting at once. Ethan moved toward what appeared to be an advanced control panel embedded into one wall while trying desperately not to focus on Lyra's mesmerizing form beside him. "You know," she said softly as she leaned against the wall watching him work intently, "humans are fascinating creatures." He glanced over his shoulder at her inquisitive gaze and smirked lightly. "And what do you find so fascinating about us?" "Your strength," she replied thoughtfully, "your courage, your passion." Ethan felt flattered yet slightly overwhelmed by her words as they lingered between them like an electric charge waiting to spark something more significant than mere attraction. "And what about you?" he asked playfully while adjusting some settings on the panel before him without really knowing what half of them meant anyway. Lyra stepped closer again until their bodies were almost touching, her breath warm against his ear as she whispered teasingly, "Oh Ethan. I think you'll find I'm full of surprises." Just then, an urgent notification chimed from Ethan's wrist device, a reminder that duty never truly ceased even amidst such captivating distractions. "Captain Rivers," it announced brusquely, interrupting their momentary connection. "Your presence is requested in the main conference room immediately." With a sigh of disappointment mingled with urgency flooding through him now that their moment had been interrupted completely, he turned back toward Lyra one last time before stepping out into reality once more. "Perhaps we can continue this conversation later," he offered hopefully while feeling reluctant to leave just yet despite knowing it was necessary for both their sakes. Lyra smiled knowingly, her eyes sparkling with mischief again, and nodded gracefully as if understanding all too well how fate often intertwined lives unexpectedly across galaxies filled with wonders yet unknown. "I look forward to it," she replied softly before Ethan stepped out into bustling hallways once more, his mind racing from both intrigue surrounding their encounter alongside lingering thoughts about what lay ahead during this historic summit between worlds unlike any other he'd ever known before now. The call to action. Captain Neil Madison stood at the entrance of the seedy bar, its neon sign flickering erratically against the backdrop of a dimly lit street. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and cheap liquor, a stark contrast to the polished halls of the celestial nexus. He felt a surge of adrenaline as he turned to Azora, who stood beside him, her vibrant blue hair catching the light in a way that made her look ethereal. "Are you ready for this?" Neil asked, his voice low and steady. He had been in dangerous situations before, but there was something about this mission that felt different, more personal. Azora flashed him a confident smile. "I was born ready, Captain. Let's find out who's behind the theft of the quantum harmonizer." With that, they stepped inside, the door creaking ominously as it swung open. The bar was filled with a mix of alien patrons, each more peculiar than the last. Neil's eyes quickly scanned the room for any signs of trouble while Azora seemed to glide effortlessly through the crowd, her presence commanding attention. They made their way to the bar, where a grizzled bartender with multiple eyes and tentacles wiped down the counter with a rag that looked like it had seen better days. "What can I get for you two?" he asked in a gravelly voice. "Information," Neil replied, leaning forward slightly. "We're looking for anyone who might have knowledge about the stolen quantum harmonizer." The bartender raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You're not from around here, are you? That kind of talk gets people killed in these parts." Azora leaned in closer, her golden eyes sparkling with mischief. "We can handle ourselves. Just point us in the right direction." The bartender considered them for a moment before nodding slowly. "There's a table in the back, 2 mercenaries who might know something. But be careful, they don't take kindly to strangers." Neil exchanged a glance with Azora, who nodded in agreement. They made their way through the crowded bar toward the back table, where 2 rough-looking figures sat hunched over their drinks. The dim light cast shadows across their faces, revealing scars and tattoos that told stories of battles fought and lost. As they approached, one of the mercenaries looked up and sneered. "What do you want?" "This is a private conversation." Neil straightened his posture, his military training kicking in as he adopted an authoritative tone. "We're here about the quantum harmonizer." We know you have information. The second mercenary laughed mockingly. You think we're just going to spill our secrets to some fancy human and his alien girlfriend? Azora stepped forward, her confidence radiating off her like heat from a star. You'd be wise to listen to us. We're not here to play games. The first mercenary leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defiantly. And what do you plan to do if we don't? Before Neil could respond, Azora reached out and touched the mercenary's arm lightly, her fingers brushing against his skin with an almost electric charge. Let's not make this difficult, she said sweetly. We can help each other. The mercenary's expression shifted slightly as he glanced at Neil and then back at Azora, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. What do you mean by that? Neil seized the opportunity and leaned closer to emphasize his point. We're willing to offer you something valuable in exchange for information, protection from those who might come after you if you're involved in this mess. The second mercenary shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. After a tense moment of silence, the first mercenary sighed heavily and leaned forward on the table. Fine. We heard whispers about a group planning to sell the harmonizer on the black market, somewhere called the Nexus Exchange. Azora raised an eyebrow in surprise. The Nexus Exchange? That's risky business. Risky is our middle name, said the second mercenary with a smirk. Neil nodded thoughtfully. They needed to act fast before whoever had stolen it could make their move. Do you know when it's happening? Tomorrow night, said the first mercenary reluctantly. But getting in won't be easy, it's heavily guarded. Azora smiled slyly at Neil as if sharing an unspoken plan between them. We'll manage. Yeah. The first mercenary looked skeptical but intrigued by their confidence. Neil stood tall and extended his hand toward them both. Thank you for your help, we'll make sure your involvement stays under wraps. Both mercenaries exchanged glances before shaking his hand hesitantly, a sign of respect amidst their usual bravado. As they left the bar, Neil felt a rush of excitement mixed with apprehension about what lay ahead. The stakes were rising quickly, they had only scratched the surface of this conspiracy. Outside, under the glow of neon lights reflecting off wet pavement, Azora turned to him with an enthusiastic grin that lit up her face like starlight illuminating darkness. Did you see how they reacted? I think we made quite an impression, she exclaimed. Neil chuckled softly at her infectious energy as they walked side by side down the street toward his quarters on the station where they would finalize their plans for infiltrating the Nexus Exchange. I'll admit, he said thoughtfully while glancing sideways at her radiant features illuminated by streetlights casting shadows across her flawless skin, I didn't expect such success so quickly. Just wait until we get inside, she replied playfully while nudging him lightly with her shoulder, a gesture that sent warmth coursing through him. Once inside Neil's quarters, an austere yet functional space adorned sparingly with personal mementos from past missions, they began strategizing their next steps. First things first, Neil said as he activated a holographic display showing maps and schematics of the Nexus Exchange layout alongside potential security measures surrounding it. Azora leaned closer again, her presence intoxicatingly alluring, as she studied each detail intently while occasionally brushing against him inadvertently. We'll need disguises, she suggested after analyzing several potential entry points marked on screen thoughtfully. Neil nodded in agreement while feeling slightly distracted by how close she was standing next to him, every brush of her skin against his ignited sparks within him that were hard to ignore. I can create something suitable for both of us, Azora continued confidently while tapping away on another device she pulled from her jumpsuit pocket, a small holographic projector displaying various outfits designed specifically for stealth operations. As they discussed various options available based on their unique physiques, one human male and one tri-breasted alien female, their chemistry intensified further as playful banter flowed naturally between them like music played softly in perfect harmony against chaos surrounding them outside those walls filled with tension hanging heavily over their heads like storm clouds ready to burst open at any moment. Hours passed quickly while they worked together, seamlessly piecing together plans until finally settling on an approach that would allow them access into the Nexus exchange without drawing too much attention while still maintaining safety protocols necessary during such high-stakes operations ahead awaiting them both soon enough. As Neil prepared himself mentally for what lay ahead, his heart racing faster than ever before, he couldn't shake off thoughts lingering deep within him about how this mission would change everything between them forever. The investigation begins. Neil and Azora stepped into the dimly lit bar, the sounds of laughter and raucous conversation washing over them like a wave. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and cheap alcohol, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the celestial nexus. Neon lights flickered erratically, casting colorful shadows across the faces of various alien patrons. Neil's senses heightened as he scanned the room, looking for any signs of trouble. "Stick close to me," he instructed Azora, his voice low but firm. "This place is crawling with mercenaries and black market dealers. We need to be careful." Azora nodded, her golden eyes sparkling with excitement. "I thrive in chaos, Captain. Let's see what we can find." They made their way through the crowded bar, weaving between tables filled with rowdy patrons. As they approached a corner booth where a group of rough-looking individuals sat, Neil felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. This was where they would find the information they needed. "Let me do the talking," Neil said as they reached the table. He leaned against the edge, crossing his arms over his chest. "We're looking for information about a stolen quantum harmonizer." One of the mercenaries, a burly creature with green skin and multiple eyes, looked up at them skeptically. "And why should we help you?" "We're willing to offer something in return," Neil replied smoothly, trying to exude confidence despite the tension in the air. "Information can be quite valuable in this line of work." Azora stepped forward, her presence commanding attention as she leaned slightly closer to the mercenaries. "I know how much you all love a good deal. Help us out, and I can guarantee you'll be well compensated." The mercenaries exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. Neil could sense that they were considering their options. "What makes you think we have any information?" another mercenary chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because you're sitting here in this bar instead of working," Azora shot back playfully, her confidence radiating off her like heat from a star. The burly mercenary chuckled, clearly amused by her boldness. "All right, I'll bite. What do you want to know?" Neil leaned in closer, lowering his voice to ensure only they could hear him. "We need to know who stole the quantum harmonizer and where it's being kept." The mercenaries exchanged glances again before one of them finally spoke up. "We heard whispers about a rival corporation wanting to get their hands on that tech. They've been known to hire mercs for dirty work." "Which corporation?" Neil pressed. The burly mercenary hesitated for a moment before answering. "The Zenth Corporation. They've been making moves lately, trying to expand their influence in this sector." Azora raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this new lead. "Do you know who specifically is involved?" "Word on the street is that they've got a contact named Varek," the mercenary replied. "He's been seen around here lately, always looking for muscle." Neil nodded thoughtfully as he processed this information. "Thank you for your help." As they turned to leave, Azora glanced back at the mercenaries with a playful smile. "And remember, if you hear anything else, don't hesitate to reach out." Once outside the bar, Neil let out a sigh of relief as they stepped into the cooler night air. "That went better than expected," he said. Azora grinned at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You mean my charm worked?" "Your charm definitely helped," Neil admitted with a chuckle. "So what's next?" she asked as they walked side by side down the bustling street. "We need to track down Varek and see if he can lead us to the harmonizer," Neil replied while consulting his wrist-mounted holomap for directions. As they navigated through crowded streets filled with various alien species going about their business, Neil couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off, an underlying tension that seemed to hang in the air like an impending storm. They arrived at an unassuming building tucked away in a dark alleyway, the kind of place that screamed danger but also promised answers. The sign above read, "The Rusty Bolt," an establishment known for its shady dealings and backroom negotiations. "Are you ready for this?" Neil asked Azora as they approached the entrance. "Always," she replied confidently. Inside, dim lighting illuminated a small bar area filled with patrons engaged in hushed conversations. The atmosphere was thick with secrecy. Neil could feel it pressing against him as he scanned for any sign of Varek. "Let's split up and see if we can find anything," he suggested after spotting an empty table in the corner where they could regroup later. Azora nodded and moved toward one side of the bar while Neil made his way toward another group of patrons huddled together at a table. He approached them cautiously, adopting an air of nonchalance as he leaned against their table casually. "I'm looking for Varek, anyone know where I can find him?" A tall alien with bright red skin looked up at him with narrowed eyes. "What do you want with Varek?" "I have business," Neil replied smoothly, trying not to reveal too much too soon. The alien exchanged glances with his companions before shrugging nonchalantly. "He might be around here somewhere, try asking over there." He pointed toward a shadowy corner where another group sat clustered together. "Thanks," Neil said before moving away from their table and making his way toward the indicated spot. As he approached, he noticed several figures sitting together, one of whom stood out from the rest, a tall man with slick back hair and an air of authority that commanded respect from those around him. "Varek?" Neil asked as he drew closer. The man looked up sharply at him, his expression unreadable beneath layers of bravado mixed with suspicion. "Who wants to know?" "I'm Captain Neil Madison, I'm here about the quantum harmonizer," he stated firmly while maintaining eye contact, a tactic meant to convey confidence without appearing threatening. Varek regarded him carefully before nodding slowly as if weighing his options carefully before speaking again. "What's it worth to you?" Neil felt irritation bubbling beneath his calm exterior but forced himself not to react impulsively. This was part of negotiating within these circles after all. "I can offer protection from your rivals if you help us locate it," he replied evenly while gauging Varek's reaction closely, hoping it would be enough incentive for cooperation rather than confrontation instead. Meanwhile across the room Azora had been observing everything unfold from afar, her keen instincts picking up on subtle cues within interactions happening around them while remaining vigilant herself against potential threats lurking nearby just waiting for an opportunity. As she watched Neil engage with Varek she couldn't help but feel admiration for how effortlessly he navigated these dangerous waters, his confidence radiating outward like waves crashing against rocky shores, a stark contrast against her own more reserved demeanor despite sharing similar goals ahead. But even amidst admiration there lingered something deeper, a connection forged through shared experiences already felt between them since first meeting earlier that day, a bond growing stronger each passing moment spent together facing challenges head-on side by side. Just then she noticed movement behind her, the unmistakable presence of someone approaching quickly, her instincts kicking into high gear warning her just in time before turning around sharply catching sight of two men advancing toward her, intent clearly written across their faces. One glance told her everything she needed. These were not friendly faces but rather threats closing in fast on both herself and Captain Madison still engaged elsewhere, unaware danger lurked nearby. With adrenaline surging through her veins Azora sprang into action, readying herself mentally, preparing for whatever chaos might ensue next. A dangerous revelation. The neon sign above the entrance to the Rusty Bolt flickered erratically, casting an eerie glow over the dimly lit street. Captain Neil Madison and Azora stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the low hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and spilled drinks, creating a palpable atmosphere of danger and intrigue. Neil scanned the room, his instincts heightened as he took in the various patrons, mercenaries, traitors, and shady characters who thrived in the underbelly of society. He felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was where they would find the information they needed to track down the stolen quantum harmonizer. "Stay close," he whispered to Azora as they made their way deeper into the bar. "We don't know who we can trust here." Azora nodded, her golden eyes sparkling with anticipation. I thrive in places like this. Let's see what we can uncover. They approached a table where a group of rough-looking individuals sat, their laughter echoing through the air. Neil took a deep breath and stepped forward, adopting an air of confidence that masked his underlying tension. Excuse me, he said, his voice steady. We're looking for information about a man named Varek. We hear he frequents this establishment. One of the mercenaries, a towering figure with scars etched across his face, looked up with narrowed eyes. What do you want with Varek? We have business with him, Neil replied, trying to keep his tone casual. It's important. The mercenary exchanged glances with his companions before leaning back in his chair, arms crossed defiantly. And why should we help you? Azora stepped forward, her presence commanding attention as she leaned against the table casually. Because we can make it worth your while, she said smoothly, her voice dripping with charm. The mercenary raised an eyebrow, intrigued but still skeptical. What do you mean? Neil seized the moment to speak up. We have resources and connections that could benefit you if you help us find Varek. After a moment of silence, the mercenary finally relented, gesturing toward a shadowy corner of the bar. He might be over there. But be careful, he's not someone you want to cross. Thanks, Neil said before motioning for Azora to follow him. As they made their way toward the indicated corner, Neil felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. This was it, the lead they had been searching for. When they reached the corner booth, Neil spotted Varek, a tall man with slick back hair and a confident demeanor, surrounded by a group of equally intimidating individuals. He approached cautiously, maintaining an air of authority. Varek? Neil called out as he drew closer. The man looked up sharply, assessing Neil and Azora with keen eyes. What do you want? He asked bluntly. We need to talk, Neil replied firmly. It's about the quantum harmonizer. Varek's expression shifted slightly, curiosity mingled with caution. And why should I discuss that with you? Because we know it was stolen by someone connected to your organization, Azora interjected smoothly, her voice laced with confidence. We can help you recover it. Varek leaned back in his seat, considering their offer carefully. You think I need help? I've got plenty of resources at my disposal. Neil stepped closer, lowering his voice to ensure only Varek could hear him. But do you have time? The longer it stays out there, the more dangerous it becomes for everyone involved. Varek's gaze flickered between them as he weighed his options. Finally, he sighed heavily and gestured for them to sit down. All right, I'll hear you out. As they settled into their seats, Azora leaned forward slightly, her golden eyes locked onto Varek's with intensity. We believe there are rival factions interested in using the harmonizer for their own gain, potentially turning it into a weapon. Varek raised an eyebrow at this revelation. You think I don't know that? This isn't my first rodeo. Neil felt a surge of frustration but kept his tone level. Then help us stop them before it's too late. Varek considered their words carefully before nodding slowly. Fine. I've heard whispers about a meeting happening soon, a trade involving advanced technology that could include the harmonizer. Where is it taking place? Azora pressed eagerly. A place called the Nexus Exchange, Varek replied reluctantly. It's heavily guarded and not easy to get into. Neil exchanged glances with Azora. This was exactly what they needed, a lead that could potentially turn the tide in their favor. When is this meeting scheduled? Neil asked urgently. Tomorrow night, Varek answered grimly. If you want to make your move, you'll need to act fast. Consider it done, Neil said decisively as he stood up from the table. As they turned to leave, Varek called after them. Just remember, this isn't just about recovering some fancy tech, there are people willing to kill for it. We understand, Neil replied over his shoulder before stepping out into the bustling street once more. Once outside the Rusty Bolt, Azora turned to Neil with excitement dancing in her eyes. This is our chance. We can't let it slip away. Neil nodded in agreement but felt a twinge of unease creeping in as well. The stakes were higher than ever now that they were on the brink of something dangerous. First things first, he said firmly as they walked side by side down the street toward his quarters on Celestial Nexus Station where they would finalize their plans for infiltrating the Nexus Exchange. As they entered his quarters, an austere yet functional space adorned sparingly with personal mementos from past missions, Neil activated a holographic display showcasing maps and schematics related to the Nexus Exchange layout alongside potential security measures surrounding it. Azora leaned closer again, her presence intoxicatingly alluring, as she studied each detail intently while occasionally brushing against him inadvertently. "We'll need disguises," she suggested after analyzing several potential entry points marked on screen thoughtfully. Neil nodded in agreement while feeling slightly distracted by how close she was standing next to him, every brush of her skin against his ignited sparks within him that were hard to ignore. "I can create something suitable for both of us," Azora continued confidently while tapping away on another device she pulled from her jumpsuit pocket, a small holographic projector displaying various outfits designed specifically for stealth operations. As they discussed various options available based on their unique physiques, one human male and one tri-breasted alien female, their chemistry intensified further as playful banter flowed naturally between them like music played softly in perfect harmony against chaos surrounding them outside those walls filled with tension hanging heavily over their heads like storm clouds ready to burst open at any moment. Hours passed quickly while they worked together seamlessly piecing together plans until finally settling on an approach that would allow them access into the Nexus Exchange without drawing too much attention while still maintaining safety protocols necessary during such high-stakes operations ahead awaiting them both soon enough. As Neil prepared himself mentally for what lay ahead, his heart racing faster than ever before, he couldn't shake off thoughts lingering deep within him about how this mission would change everything between them forever. The final showdown. The neon sign above the Nexus Exchange buzzed ominously, casting a flickering glow over the entrance as Captain Neil Madison and Azora Stormwind approached. The air was thick with tension, a palpable energy swirling around them as they prepared for the confrontation that could change the fate of intergalactic peace. Neil's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he recalled the stakes of their mission, the stolen quantum harmonizer, a device that could either revolutionize energy production or become a weapon of mass destruction in the wrong hands. "Are you ready for this?" Neil asked, glancing at Azora, who stood beside him, her expression a mix of determination and excitement. "Always," she replied with a confident smile, her golden eyes sparkling with mischief. "Let's show them what we're made of." As they stepped inside the bar, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The dimly lit room was filled with mercenaries and shady characters huddled around tables, engaged in hushed conversations. Neil scanned the crowd, his instincts on high alert. He spotted Varek, the contact who had first tipped them off about the meeting, sitting at a table in the far corner. "Let's move," Neil said, leading the way through the throng of patrons. They approached Varek cautiously, their senses heightened as they prepared for whatever might come next. "Captain Madison," Varek greeted them with a smirk as they reached his table. "I see you brought company." "This is Azora Stormwind," Neil introduced her, keeping his tone neutral. "We're here for the harmonizer." Varek leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "You're not the only ones interested in that piece of tech. There are others here tonight, rival factions looking to make their move." Neil felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "What do you mean? Are they planning to ambush us?" "Possibly," Varek replied nonchalantly. "But if you want to get your hands on the harmonizer, you'll need to act fast." Azora exchanged a glance with Neil, her expression serious. "What's our best course of action?" Varek leaned forward conspiratorially. "There's a back door leading to the storage area where they're keeping the harmonizer. If we can get there before anyone else does, we might stand a chance." Neil nodded decisively. "Then let's move." As they made their way toward the back of the bar, Neil felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with determination. They had come too far to let this slip away now. Suddenly, chaos erupted around them as shouts filled the air and blaster fire rang out from various corners of the bar. Mercenaries scrambled for cover as rival factions clashed in a violent confrontation. "Get down!" Neil shouted, pulling Azora close as he ducked behind a nearby table for cover. "Looks like our window just closed," Azora said grimly as she peered over the edge of the table to assess the situation. Neil cursed under his breath. They needed to find another way to reach the storage area. "We have to push through. Stay close." With that, he sprang into action, moving swiftly from cover to cover while keeping an eye on Azora as she followed closely behind him. They navigated through the chaos, dodging blaster fire and debris as they made their way toward the back door. Just as they reached it, Neil felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, a searing heat that radiated through him as he stumbled slightly from the impact of a stray shot. "Neil!" Azora cried out in alarm as she rushed to his side. "I'm fine," he grunted through clenched teeth, forcing himself to focus despite the pain. "We need to keep moving." With renewed determination, they pushed through the door and into a dimly lit corridor that led to a series of storage rooms. The air was thick with tension and uncertainty. Every step felt like it could be their last. "Where do we go from here?" Azora asked urgently as they reached a junction in the corridor. Neil consulted his wrist-mounted holomap quickly before pointing down one of the hallways. "This way. The harmonizer should be stored at the end." They sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline fueling their every movement as they rounded corners and dodged obstacles along their path. The sounds of chaos faded behind them but were quickly replaced by distant shouts and blaster fire echoing through the halls. As they approached a large door marked with warning signs indicating restricted access, Neil felt his heart race even faster. This was it. They were so close. "Stand back," he instructed Azora as he pulled out his plasma pistol and aimed it at the door's control panel. With a quick blast, he disabled the locking mechanism and kicked open the door. Inside was a vast storage room filled with crates and equipment stacked haphazardly against one another. But what caught their attention was a large containment unit at the far end. Inside it lay the quantum harmonizer, pulsating with energy. "There it is!" Azora exclaimed excitedly as she rushed toward it. Neil followed closely behind but suddenly froze when he heard footsteps approaching from behind them. A group of armed mercenaries had followed them into the storage area. "Looks like we're not alone," he muttered under his breath just before turning to face their adversaries. The mercenaries emerged from shadows brandishing weapons aimed directly at them. Neil felt his pulse quicken as he assessed their options. "Hand over the harmonizer," one of them shouted menacingly while stepping forward threateningly. Azora stood beside Neil defiantly, her gaze unwavering despite facing multiple armed opponents. "You'll have to fight us for it." With that declaration hanging in the air like an electric charge ready to spark chaos anew, Neil knew there was no turning back now. This was going to be one hell of a showdown. Without hesitation he raised his plasma pistol aiming directly at their leader while simultaneously signaling Azora, silently urging her to prepare for whatever came next. The tension in that moment felt almost tangible, a standoff between two forces unwilling to back down until one emerged victorious. Then all hell broke loose. Blaster fire erupted around them as both sides engaged in fierce combat. Neil ducked behind crates using every ounce of training he possessed while returning fire, strategically picking off opponents one by one alongside Azora, who fought fiercely by his side, displaying incredible agility and skill even amidst chaos surrounding them. With each shot fired, adrenaline surged through him, further igniting determination within. This was more than just about recovering technology now. It was about protecting lives, ensuring peace remained intact across galaxies threatened by greed, ambition lurking beneath surface ready to consume everything if left unchecked. As blaster bolts flew past him, narrowly missing their mark, Neil caught sight of Azora engaging an enemy mercenary head-on, her movements fluid and graceful, almost mesmerizing despite danger looming overhead. In that moment something shifted within him. A realization that transcended mere attraction blossoming into something deeper, forged through shared experiences facing adversity together side by side. But there was no time for distractions now. focus remained paramount amidst chaos unfolding around them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity battling through waves upon waves of mercenaries, Neil spotted an opening near containment unit where Harmonizer lay waiting patiently untouched by chaos surrounding it. "Azora! Cover me," he shouted, determinedly charging forward toward prize awaiting him just beyond reach. With blaster fire ringing out around him, drowning out everything else, the world narrowed down until only goal mattered, reclaiming what had been stolen, fighting against odds stacked high against them. As he reached containment units securing Harmonizer within grasp, he felt rush wash over him, exhilaration mixed with relief knowing they had succeeded against all odds. But victory came at cost. Glancing back toward Azora battling fiercely against remaining foes, his heart raced knowing this wasn't over yet. Together they would face whatever came next, united, standing strong against darkness threatening galaxy beyond comprehension. And so began final chapter unfolding before them, one filled with uncertainty but also hope, knowing together they could overcome anything thrown their way.